if you don't have a good systematic way to make things happen, then people get very frustrated and burn out. As you keep coming up with great ideas and things to do or whatever. And if you're talking small business, you wear almost all the hats.
Welcome back to Business Processes Simplified, where we dive deep into the world of systems, processes, and productivity to help small business owners and to help them operate more efficiently. I'm incredibly honored today to have our guest joining us. He's someone who's very much revolutionized productivity, and not just at the individual level, but has also transformed how many businesses, both big and small, how they think about and manage their work. David Allen is the best-selling author of Getting Things Done, which is a must-read for every business owner. I'll make sure I include a link to the book if you haven't yet got it. Definitely check it out. GTD has become very much a global phenomenon, almost like with a cult-like following, with great reason. Like you'll see as we dive into it, it's a phenomenal system. So we're going to explore how the principles of the book can be applied specifically to small business owners. But first things first, just wanted to welcome you to the call, David.
Thanks, David. Good. Thanks for the invitation. Delighted to be here.
Pleasure. Now, with the limited time we've got, I'll jump straight into it. I know GTD is very clearly a system. I'm curious to know if you see yourself as a systems thinker. Is that something that you go, yes, that's me, or do you not see yourself as a systems person?
I guess I am, but only in retrospect.
Yes.
I never really, it's kind of like the last thing a fish notices is water. And I suppose the last thing a systems person notices is that they're into systems.
Yeah.
I'm just into lazy, and that means how efficiently can I get from here to there? And
Mm-mm.
so I guess you need some sort of a system to do that, or a way to think, a systematic thinking process, really. And that's a lot of what I think I discovered, uncovered, and objectified was the systematic thinking process that you have to apply in order to have a clear head.
Mm-mm. Was there a particular point when you uncovered GTD, like the system, where a moment or something that said, yes, I need to bring this to light, or I need to get this documented in a book? Was there a particular something that was the catalyst or
The
not really?
particular something was I'd spent 20 years doing this work of implementing, discovering what this methodology was and making that part of my initial consulting practice, and then being asked to bring that into the large corporate world and got thrown into the corporate training world and designing some sort of a seminar around this. So it was really, I didn't write a book and then figure out a business. I just had a business and had a career. And then at some point, somebody said, David, you ought to write the book. Because, David, it took me 20 years to figure out what I'd figured out. And then nobody else seemed to have done that. And that it was bulletproof. So by that point, I'm not a ta-da kind of person. I just
Yeah.
had to trust that if I was going to put, what I'd learned in my career into a manual, it better be good and bulletproof. So by that point, I had enough confidence to go ahead and write the book, though I didn't know how to write a book. I had to read 3 books on how you write a book uh, to get started. So, I started doing this work in 1983, 84 when I designed a seminar around this stuff for Lockheed in California. And then, I didn't pull the trigger on writing a book until 1997. And then it took 4 years to get it really to the shelf because I was working full time and trying to write a book about all this at the same time. So that's a short version of a very long story, David.
No, that's perfect. With the system itself, did you, because you kind of perfected it over the years, was it kind of massaged into place? Like, as in, did you take steps out and say, oh, that step now needs to go before there, and you're testing it with, in the field? Is that how this system developed?
It's really how this system developed. I had the basic core of it with my small little consulting practice that I started in 1982, and I had a great mentor, for a year or two who taught me some of the pieces of this because he was using that in organizational change consulting, and it was powerful. Just writing everything down and deciding next actions on anything that has your attention. Just those 2 things are powerful. Uh,
Mm,
um, Powerful things to do in terms of your productivity. And we were doing it, and he was doing it as a way to sort of clear the deck in an organization, so there wasn't a lot of old business hanging around like barnacles on the ship, so that they could then, go smooth sailing toward, some desired future. But there's so much old business most people have hanging around. So figuring that out,
Mm,
that became sort of a core of it. And then I started adding pieces to it that I had from, other sources in my own experience. But David, I haven't had any traditional formal education in time management, product, or business or psychology. This is all street stuff. It was all stuff I learned by doing and then watching what happened. I did it for myself first because I was into staying clear as my life got more complex and busy. But then everything I discovered that worked for me, I turned around and started using it with my consulting clients, and it worked for them too. They got more
mm,
clarity, more control, more ability to focus, more space to focus on the critical strategic stuff in their businesses. So that became just part of a key part of what I was delivering for people. But again, it took me that long to figure. I thought anybody making a lot more money than me would have already figured this out. Not true. So what's fascinating is the people most attracted to what I came up with are the people who need it the least. They're
mm,
already some of the most productive, aspirational, positive thinking, forward looking people. They already know the value of system. They already know the value of getting organized. They already know they can produce value because I got them where they are. They just run out of room.
mm,
They got no
mm.
more space. So their hurt is, I coached a guy in, one of the top entrepreneurs in the world by anybody's standards. And I asked him, why are you calling me? He said, I got no more room. I wake up with $1 million ideas. I got nowhere to put them or who to give them to. I don't know what to do with all that. So I I worked with him for a year, you know, coaching him with this methodology, and he's still a big champion and a friend.
Mm.
So that you mentioned cult in there. What's strange is the people attracted to this are the most non-joining people you'd ever meet because this whole methodology is about self-management. It's about being independent. It's about not being dependent on anybody else to get your life and work in order. So what's interesting is that I wound up sort of being well known in a
Mm.
fairly large community out there of some of the most independent, self-generating, self-organized people you'd know.
There's definitely people can get quite fanatical about it. I think the sign of a great system is something that stands the test of time. And I know you mentioned you've been working on this for ages. And even with all of the technology changes and things that have changed, like when you go back to the 5 steps, it's still as true today as it was great back then. And I feel like that it's got just
As
enough.
true as it will be in 2090 when we fly to Jupiter, they still need to capture what has their attention. They still need to clarify what are we going to do about this, and what's reference material, and what's trash, and and what are the outcomes that we're committed to complete about this stuff, and where do we organize the results if we can't finish it in the moment, so that the right person can review and reflect on it, at the right time and space, so that when we engage with whatever we do, it's from a level of confidence, not hope. So it's universal stuff. And I think we did a pretty good job of making this as evergreen as you could make it. See, a lot of people want to add the digital world. They want to add the computer stuff and the applications to solve stuff. They won't. It's going to make it harder, actually. It's going to give you another project to try to figure the thing out and how to use it. So you need the thought process first. Then you can make any tool work. You can make
Mm.
pen and paper work. Can't beat that.
What I love is probably in about 60 seconds there, if someone goes back and listens, you actually went through the system. Like it's simple enough that you can just roll through. And yet, if you want to go into more detail in each stage, it's there. I'd be interested to know with some of the changes, and after the book has been launched and all of its success, like your learning has continued, is there anything that you either wish you added in or, an additional chapter or something where you're just kind of like, oh, now I've seen this rolled out millions of times. What has stood out for you for lessons?
Well, I don't know when you're going to publish this, but I have a new book which is exactly that's coming out in late May this year.
Awesome.
It's called Team: Getting Things Done with Others. So
Wow.
the
Yeah.
yeah, because over all these years, anybody gets this methodology, they go, God, I wish everybody around me got this. It would make life and work so much easier. But I never had the bandwidth or a good template or a model to share with people about that. But I co-authored with Ed Lamont, my GTD partner in the UK, who spent a good bit more time than I have in the last couple of decades working with senior teams that he's trained with GTD, and then watching how that affects uh, a team culture. And so he and I then have spent the last 2 years crafting this book, and that's the blank that needed to be filled in, because people get it and they say, everybody around me needs to get this. How do we do that? So we wrote this really as a manual, and it will be a manual for anybody. It's going to be it's very thick, and thick meaning there's so much stuff in it. What it is basically the getting things done principles applied in a team context. How does a team capture?
Yeah.
Right. If you're on a team, that means, and you're on a team, by the way, if you're married, or if you're a taxi drive, or you have kids, or or you're trying to start a company, whoever that you need to get stuff done with makes you a team. So, what does the team need to capture? If I walked in as a
Mm.
consultant or a coach to any team, I'd say, what's got the team's attention right now?
If I was,
You know,
'cause that almost feels like that would be step number one in the system. If I went back to step zero, I'm curious to know, like, how in a team setting you would look at getting the team to buy into this, because changing of culture is oftentimes one of the hardest things here before rolling out a process. And no doubt you've done some deep thinking on that.
well, we have a couple of chapters on standards. How do what are our rules of engagement for how we run meetings? What are our rules of engagement about how often we respond to email? And we really wrote just the mechanics, not all that high level stuff about charisma and collaboration and all that things that you read in all the leadership stuff out there. Um, we talk about leadership, but how do you lead a team to make sure it executes your vision? You could be a visionary, but then have systems that suck in terms of how you get how they happen. So you need to combine both of those. So that's what we've tried to address with this new book. That will, because you really, if you can't, if you don't have a good systematic way to make things happen, then people get very frustrated and burnt out. As you keep coming up with great ideas and things to do or whatever. And if you're talking small business, you wear almost all the hats, and so you have to be a financial person at some point to see if the check bounced. Then you have to be a party person if you're trying to party and PR, and you have to wear all those different hats. And so understanding what are the different roles that need to get handled in a team or a group context. So we talk a lot about roles. How clear are the roles? If you and I sort of say, yeah, let's get this done, and we don't have a further conversation about, well, what are you going to do about that? What am I going to do about that? Then that creates a whole lot of stress and friction that's not necessary. So it's really more the mechanics. What are the mechanics of a good meeting? Do you want to let people, you are allowing people to come in with 3 digital devices and not pay attention to the slides that you're trying to present? Are you letting people come late to the meeting? Are you right? Are you inviting the right people given the purpose of the meeting? Do you even know what the purpose of the meeting is? And therefore, who do you need to invite? Are they clear about what purpose they're trying to fulfill by being in the meeting? I mean, these are this is advanced common sense stuff. And a lot of teams kind of do these automatically because they somehow have emerged, being a pretty successful team, but they couldn't
Mm.
replicate it. They don't know what they did right. So all we've done is say, here's what you do that's right. Here's what are the things that create dysfunction. And then you can pick and choose which one of those you think your team might need to use to enhance its high performance. We're talking about high performance, high, sustainable high performance, which means you're A lot of people are doing high performance, but they're burning people out and themselves,
Mm,
because they're not paying attention to what's the sustainability of how we're doing what we're doing. And then a lot of people are into, let's, kumbaya, hold each other, be nice, have a collaborative thing, but they're not going anywhere. They're not producing what they think they ought to produce. So you need to have healthy high performance, and that's there. Those are the two aspects of it: the high performance aspect and also the healthy aspect,
mm.
and those need to be synthesized together.
My brain can't help but default into the system. I think that's almost how I'm naturally wired. And I'm imagining here the start of the system, there's some form of standards for this new book. Then I'm imagining like some sort of meeting cadence or something with certain agenda items to be able to, have a way for capturing and clarifying and even later on in
Yeah,
the process with, even organize and reflect. Reflect might be part of a either annual review or your 90-day rocks or
yeah.
am I kind of on the right track for the new book?
No, no, no. You're on the right track. We couldn't. People have been knocking on our door saying, "Are you going to create a training out of this book?" I go, "No, I don't think so." It's more like a consulting manual because every team is very different.
Yeah.
Every team and what it needs is very different. It even is going to need different things 2 weeks from now when three of your people leave and you got three new people on the team, right? So things are, especially these days, with things flattening and becoming hybrid and becoming virtual and becoming and all those different little factors that are making change faster, more complex these days in terms of how you work with other people, you know.
Mm.
And so that's so unique to the situation. So there are a lot of high performing teams. They just again don't know how they got there. They need to recognize what they did, so in case their team changes or they go to another team, they know what worked and what didn't work and how to rework it and reconfigure it. But that could be very different. Some teams need to focus on purpose.
Yeah.
Some teams need to focus on their principles and standards of how they operate together. Some teams just need to capture better. They got a lot of
Mm.
stuff banging around in the halls and around the coffee machine that nobody's grabbed. That has the team's attention. You know, they need to. Some teams need to clarify better. Yeah, they got a big
Yeah.
list up there, but have they actually gone through are we going to actually move on this? And what would moving look like and who's doing it? And a lot of teams need to organize better. They may have had those great conversations, but where'd they park the stuff, in some place that people will see when they need to see it or be reminded about it? So every one of the aspects, and we cover the three basic models that I covered in Getting Things Done, which are the 5 phases we've talked about, the 6 horizons of commitments that you have, and then the natural planning model, which is how
Mm.
do I take a situation or project and walk it through the right thought process so
Yeah.
it so we're optimally engaged.
If each organization is a little bit different and the 5 steps still apply, and then I'm imagining tools underneath each step that then can be specifically applied to a team environment.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and most people don't get that these are very different. They all can come together very quickly:
Yeah.
capture, clarify, organize, reflect. But it's a very different process to capture than it is to clarify, than it is to organize, than it is to reflect. And so there will be different tools that one could use. Capture could just be Kanban post-its on a whiteboard,
Mm.
right? Capture could be, hey, let's just get together, folks, and go up to a whiteboard and somebody say what's got the team's attention right now, and somebody just making that list could look like a lot of things. So the tool doesn't really matter. What matters is the process that you go through and the content you generate with it. And then how do you clarify? Well, there are a lot of tools out there. There are probably over 300 apps that have been built supposedly doing the GTD model, and
Yeah.
they're all basically just list managers. You know, how do I, where do I put it? And it's a combination of, okay, how do I clarify the next action on something, and then where do I put it? And they become just good list managers that they can facilitate both step 2 and 3. They can facilitate clarifying what you need to do and then where to park that.
Mm.
But yeah, So the various tools, the tools kind of don't matter. You can do all of this with pen and paper.
Yeah.
Everything. You can capture everything with pen and paper. You can go through the list that you just made in your, you know, on your little pad and say,
Yeah.
what's next? What's the next thing I need to do? And oh, I need to call Bill. Right, right. And you could have another page that says calls to make, or you could have a paper planner that just keeps a list that way. And some high tech people I know have gone back to paper simply because, especially if they're sort of ADD or ADHD esque, where they don't have the patience to sit through 14 clicks on their computer to input something and to look at it, right? They
Mm.
much prefer something right in their face that's instantly available. None of that are optimal. In other words, there are high tech tools that are great that would be better than trying to use paper for certain things, and then some things are better. I collect 98% of the time on paper and pen just because it's fast. There are no batteries required. I don't have to be on Wi-Fi. So that's my capture step is low tech. Now I use for my list management. I just use Microsoft Notes or to dos, Microsoft to dos. We since we implemented Office 365 because it's just a list manager.
Yeah.
But you could use any. There are tons out there just as a way to organize those things. But you do need different tools for those different procedures, and you need a different tool for how do you keep track of the projects you have as a team. And there are all kinds of team collaborative software that has shown up that could be really good if everybody agrees on the protocols about how to use it and who uses it and at what level of detail, but that's rare.
Mm.
Most of those team applications don't work because everybody doesn't work them.
Yeah.
And if they're incomplete, they're not a system.
I
The
think
best systems, by the way, digitally that work are the CRMs, where you're fired if you don't input the client data because somebody else needs to be on the phone when the client calls to know what happened. And so those systems, so that's why Salesforce is, so successful. Because they've built, systems that are, mission critical relative to a sales organization anyway,
mm.
in terms of doing that. But otherwise, if you're a knowledge worker, that kind of stuff is tough to digitalize. How do you create a system for marketing? How do you create a system for design? How do you create a system for HR? And a lot of those have some systems that they can use, but it's very difficult to find anything that's totally thorough. So you have to trust people are trained enough to know what system they need to use for what and why, and don't assume that the system is going to make things work.
Oh, hey, I know you're tuned in right now, so I'll keep this super quick, but you like awesome YouTube videos, don't you? Well, there's not really that many YouTube channels that create great content about how to systemize your small business. So I want to make sure that you catch every video that I publish. So if you haven't already, firstly, give this video the thumbs up and then go ahead and subscribe to my channel. You can even hit the bell notification to make sure that you're the first to know when I publish anything. So go ahead, do it right now. I'll wait a sec and then I'll transfer you back to the video. I think a sign of a great system is one like GTD that is platform agnostic and something that you can bolt in different software systems, and the soundness of the system remains because it's not about the tool. So we're very much on the same page there. You mentioned something, and I was thinking about the throughput of going through the 5 steps as a team, and then the idea of, well, every team is a bit different, so where do you actually start? I'd be interested with your thoughts on that, as far as, is it a matter of looking at the 5 steps and then going, well, where's this breaking down for this team, and then going to work on that piece, and then probably as high up the chain as possible. So either, as close to capture, clarify, work your way down. But I'm assuming you would try and go, if we're trying to get from 1 to 5 and there's a bottleneck up here at 2, well, let's go to work on that first so we can get to 3.
Yeah, no, That makes total sense, and that's really true. The problem is if you haven't captured everything, you're
Yes.
not going to trust any of the rest
Yeah.
because you'll know there's stuff outlying there that's not that hasn't been considered or addressed to be organized, to be clarified, and to be reflected on. So capture is absolutely the first thing to do. And
Mm-mm.
maybe everybody's captured, but I doubt that.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
doubt that. You know,
There's definitely something with that capture step that I think, and it's a little bit counterintuitive, I think, when we think about systems and processes, because I often say systems and processes create space which allow for creativity, and oftentimes people think, oh, systems don't equal creativity, but I'd love your perspective on that, because I almost feel like it's the same thing in GTD. Just getting it out of your head creates space. So do you have some insight into how this methodology helps with creativity?
oh, just lots of anecdotal
Yeah.
stuff from very creative people that say, "Oh, wow, I implemented GTD, and then I was able to get so many more ideas, be able to express so much more of my creativity, because I was able to create it." I mean, people say, "Well, I don't like structure." We say, well, "What do you think about the center line in the highway?" That's a
Yeah.
constraint, right? I'm saying, stay here. Don't go over there. Stay here. Oh, I'm so glad. Why? It allows me to think about other things while I'm driving, as opposed to, is somebody going to hit me? So, structure and freedom are you know hand in glove together.
Hmm.
You need ask any paint. People say, I like to be creative. What do you like to do? I like to paint. Let me see your paintbrushes. Neat as a pin.
Yeah.
Where are your paints? Neat as a pin. If you didn't know where your paints were or which paintbrush to do, and your paintbrushes are not cleaned or ready to go, you're going to lose the opportunity to be creative just to walking into your studio, right? So, and come on, ask any athlete. You want to be highly creative as an athlete, what do you think you need to do? You damn well better get a good structure,
Hmm.
you know, both in terms of your training as well as knowing where the sidelines are when you're playing soccer, you know, or football, and where the goal is. So structure is just part of our life. If you were totally disorganized, you couldn't get out of bed. So everybody has some sort of structure. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing whatever they're doing. Most people just think that they're okay. That's why
Yeah.
there's not a huge the uptake in GTD has not been as huge as it probably could be if people really realized what they could get if they did it. There are 3 million copies of the book out there, so there's it's big enough. But you know, how many people do you know who could use it, who could do more of it?
How do you quantify the impact? Like, it's very hard to say rolling out GTD will create a ROI of XYZ. Like, it's because it's so far reaching and touches all aspects. Like, it's a fundamental thing. So I don't know if you have any insights on that.
No, people
Yep.
say, "What's the ROI?" I say, "Well, what are you measuring?"
Yes. Yep.
Don't ask me to ask to tell you what you should be measuring in your organization. You tell me. And they go,
Yep.
I don't know. I go, great.
Yep.
Well, if you don't have some measure about what you think is good, or what return on what would the return on this investment be, about what? Are you talking profitability? Are you talking quality of work life? Are you talking lack of turnover in terms of people leaving your company? Are you what are you
Yep.
measuring? But if somebody can give me a pretty clear answer, I'll say I'll be willing to bet you. If you haven't implemented GTD already, and you did, it's going to improve that number.
Yes.
That's the best I could do after my 79 years of.
That's Um, with the I mean, as you start to bridge into teams, I'm really looking forward to the new book. I'm yeah, definitely want to check that out. Um, where does process fit into this? Because you did mention the idea of standards, and that's kind of, setting, all right, here's how we operate. This is kind of like a bit of the rules of the game from a company level. When we get down to tic tacs, and especially when we think about delegation and things like that, because that's part of the GTD stuff is getting things off your plate that
Mhm.
could be executed by someone else or another team member, and in a team setting, that's what it's about. Yeah, where do you see process fitting into this?
Well, that's the process. When I got trained in this methodology with my mentor back in 1982, one of the things we did was have everybody write everything that had their attention on a separate piece of paper. This was pre-digital,
Yeah,
right? And then that created a big pile of stuff that had their attention. Then we'd go through each one of those and go, well, okay, what is this? What's the next action? And once they decided what the next step on it was, I say, can that be delegated? And if so, we actually had a printed form for delegating. Because again, I guess this was paper-based systems.
mm,
Make sure everybody had in baskets. So they'd pull out that form and fill out, okay, Bill, can you handle this? Jose, can you handle this? Susan, can you handle this? And they would go in their out basket. And then they were amazed because the next day they would get answers back. It's like, oh my God, this all this stuff got unstuck
mm,
simply because of a very simple process called can it be delegated? And if so, how would you do that? These days, you could obviously send an email or hold it as an agenda, meaning a list of things to talk to that person about when you have a one-on-one with them. So I could tell you a lot of the executives that I've coached and our coaches have coached. Two of the biggest things that have made a big difference for them immediately are agenda list, meaning let's create a list for each of your direct reports or anybody that you want to keep track of stuff you need to talk to them about, ask them about, or hand off to them if you want to save
yeah,
it for that face to face. And then a waiting for list. Here's all the things that I've now handed off. I need to keep track of that. So the delegation piece, the delegation process is, hey, hand it off. And
yeah,
there's obviously lots of best practices. Make sure it's clear. Make sure they don't come back with questions about what you actually meant. There's a lot of stuff about delegation. We don't go into a lot of that detail. There's a lot of good information
mm,
out there. Maybe you have it too, in terms of good ways to delegate. But hand it off. One of the things we say in the book is you should only do what only you could do.
yeah. Feel like that's the game of business is constantly delegating down tasks to less skilled, potentially lower cost team members to then free you up to work on the highest value stuff. When
Or not necessarily down. Sometimes you want to delegate to your board.
yes, yeah,
Sometimes you want to delegate to your partner.
yeah,
So it's not necessarily a downward flow. Many times it is.
yeah,
If you're thinking hierarchy,
yes.
uh, but not always.
And doc, when it comes to that handoff, do you have any thoughts on like documented process? Is that something that you see?
Well, if you care, you get a result from what you hand off. Sometimes I hand things off and I go, if it shows up, fine. If it doesn't, I'm fine too. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
And sometimes it's like, yeah, I now need to keep track. That's why the waiting for list is there.
yeah,
And I've got a digital version of that. But before I had a computer, I had a paper-based version of that. And what you don't want is the thing to blow up before you decide to follow up.
yeah,
So you need to keep some sort of a systematic way to do that. Now, a team itself, again, that's where you come to the complexity. What does a team need to keep track of and organize and be reminded of in terms of who's doing what and by when that the team has decided? So that's where some of the groupware, applications can be used in that way if you agree on the protocols and everybody uses it and pays
yeah,
attention to it and it's current and it's complete. Uh, but many times it's just the individuals need to be who cares that this thing happens, and their personal systems then need to keep track of that.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. The challenges that you see, particularly in a team environment, are there any common challenges to rolling out GTD where people stumble and it doesn't quite work, or they try it and then say, "Oh, we tried that for a week and the team didn't follow the process and oh, GTD doesn't work for us." Like, are there any obvious things that stand out from?
Any of the, any
Yeah.
of that,
Yeah.
any one of the 5 steps, if it's not totally current or complete,
Yeah.
can cause this thing to crash and burn. Any one of the 6 horizons of commitments, if those are not clear, you don't know what your purpose is, you don't know what your standards are, you don't know what your vision of success looks like, you don't know what goals you've committed to, and objectives over the next 12 to 24 months.
Mm,
You don't know what roles you have. That's a big missing out there, is
yeah.
lack of role clarification in terms of teams. And then even if you have all that, is everybody aware of which projects, that is, which things need to get completed within the next 12 months? We need to hire this person. We need to research this consulting thing. We need to ensure that we've reorganized the team appropriately. We need, so, and if that's not complete, people then don't trust what's going on, and they go, "Hey, there's a lot of stuff going on that wasn't in the system, and we don't trust it. Let's just fly by the seat of our pants."
Mm,
So that, and then, boy, a big missing one is, what's the next action? All I have to do is go and, what's got the team's attention, and all I have to do is, so what's the next action on all this? And if they don't know yet, they got a big piece missing. And if they
mm,
don't, if somebody isn't rigorous enough, because you're not born asking that question, you actually have to train yourself to think at that level of game.
mm,
Here's our project, great. What's the next step? Who's doing it? Oh, here's our purpose, great. You know, got any projects about that? Are all your projects on purpose? Who cares? So again, that these are such myriad kinds of conversations or challenges or glitches that may happen in a team. That's why I couldn't come up with some uh, simple formula that's going to work for everybody. We came up with a pretty simple description of all of the key elements that one should consider, but any one of those could fall out.
mm. You mentioned something that made me think about getting the right person who would be able to potentially follow the process. I know you said it has to be trained. Are there certain characteristics when you're thinking about recruiting to try and find the person and get the right person up front that is going to gel with this way of working and set yourself up from success at the start?
Yeah, that's where standards come in, and that's why that's such a critical thing. If you
Yeah.
could create a list or a listing of the critical standards, rules of engagement. Here's how we play in the company. Here's how we play on this team. And then when you're recruiting somebody, say, "You willing to play this way?"
Yeah.
Say, "This is how we're going to do it." Because a lot of people bring their own standards into it and need to, and thinking everybody thinks everybody has the same standards they do, and they don't. Uh, so one company that we've worked with in Norway literally created a whole several pages of, here's how we use Slack, here's how we use our internal communication system, here's what you send SMS for, here's what you need a phone call for, here's what you need face to face for.
Mm.
Because channel creep is one of the biggest issues these days. There's so many channels that have been set up to supposedly get rid of email. Wrong answer
Yeah.
there. All it's done is add more in baskets, to what you need to then look at and what you need to do to be clear yourself personally. So getting standards about how you use which channel in your company, you know,
Mm.
you should only call when X is true. You should only SMS when X is true. You can use our internal sort of channel, Slack like channel, if you're doing these kinds of things. Now that was a very rigorous exercise they went through to just define what those protocols were. But apparently, we checked a year later and it's like, yeah, it works great.
Yeah.
So to be able to do that, so that would be the kind of thing that I would say would be the biggest factor in hiring.
Mm. I think what I love about that is you kind of programming people in from day dot. This is how we do things here. And I find as we try and change organizations, like all of the resistance for any sort of change comes from existing team members. But if you indoctrinate new team members and they just go, oh, this is how we do things here, and that's all they've ever known, there's no resistance. So I always find the resistance comes up front with the existing team members. Do you have any tips on how to overcome or stick with uh, GTD as you're rolling it out long enough that you get over that hump and it starts to stick? And obviously it'll vary from organization to organization depending on the size. Like oftentimes the bigger the organization, the harder it is to change the culture. But do you have any thoughts on how to kind of really lean into this and stick to it?
Well, the best thing is whoever is influential, and that doesn't necessarily mean senior, just influential. If they start to model these behaviors,
Yeah.
that's the best thing that can happen to make it stick. Because then people feel uncomfortable around them if they're not sort of stepping up to their standards.
Yeah.
Uh, so you know, if I'm your boss and I'm keeping track of everything I've delegated to you, and you show up on a face to face and say, "Let's go over these 6 things," you go, "Oh, really? Which 6 things?" Then you're not going to feel very comfortable. The fact that
Mm,
you're not personally keeping track of your own commitments, with me. So again, a lot of it has to do with just modeling the standards and then holding people accountable to them. And some of them you can legislate, some of them you can't. And you need both the combination, just like a soccer team or a football team. You need players who know how to play well, but then you need players who know how to play on a team well. And those are two very different things.
mm,
You could have excellent soccer players, but they've never been trained in how to work together on a soccer team, then you're out of luck. So for healthy high performance on a team basis or a company basis, you need both individuals who manage themselves well, as well as good team systems that then make sure that the lack doesn't that the dysfunctionality doesn't get in the way of the bigger stuff the team ought to be doing.
mm, mm. With the different levels of team members, are there modifications then to the system depending on where someone sits in an organization, or is the system just the system, or is there a separate system for the way that management might think about this and how they oversee, other than, like you said, really upholding the team members to the standard and setting the example and saying this is how we do things here? Have you seen if there are any other tweaks that make more sense
Well,
from a leadership
there are
perspective?
as many tweaks as there are different teams. Tweaks meaning
Yeah,
which parts of this are important, which parts aren't. You and your taxi driver just need to agree on your desired outcome. I want to get there. You need to desire on your standards. Make sure I pay you. Make sure you're nice. Make sure you don't overspeed or scare me. So you're going to need any and all of these principles applied with any group of people that you want to get things done with. There's
mm,
no exception to that. But what a board looks like when it goes through this process or assesses itself in terms of how we doing as a board uh, may come up with different answers than how we doing as me and my life partner.
if I'm
But same stuff.
understanding if I'm understanding correctly, there are the 5 steps here, and the level of detail in which you would need to go into each step would really depend on the context and where you're at and what's required to get the optimal result with the minimum number of steps, effectively, to say what's the minimum number to get the optimal result so you don't over engineer it. Is that
Right.
how you think about it?
All you need is what you need to essentially get the situation off people's mind.
Yeah.
It needs to get onto cruise control. What do you need to do to get this project onto cruise control so that you're all comfortable with who's doing what and where and when and how? If you're there, you've done enough. If you're
Yeah.
not there, you got stuff to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. We talk a little bit about that with some of our clients around, like, project management software is very specifically to go who is doing what by when, and make sure that that's clearly spelled out so there's no confusion and it's transparent. And then the how is the documentation of the process, and sometimes that's held separately. So I can see in my brain how that clicks together. Um, are there any, and you've got so many, so maybe we think in terms of a team context, but any stories that come to mind, like if you look back over your career and you think about who is the dream client and you'd love to have a million more of them and they're a pleasure to deal with and they got tremendous results. I don't know if there's a story that comes to mind of transformational change in an organization. Hard
Well,
question, I
there are
know.
myriads of those stories that they've happened. I mean, that's kept me going for the last 40 years since I've been doing this work. I don't think I could pick any one particular one. Uh, Teams have come and gone, and some of them have been brilliant in terms of how much they've implemented this stuff. So I know my co-author Ed worked with a major um, German company, big one, and what they discovered was that by implementing this process, even people who hadn't been in a GTD training, as opposed to having 2,000 unprocessed emails in their in basket, they'd come in with only 20 or 50 because everybody around them had sort of bought into that standard. And so burnout in Germany, by the way, is a big issue.
Mm,
It costs them a lot of money when somebody burns out. They have to support them, they have to pay for them, they have to do all kinds of stuff. And the burnout rate went way, 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 way down just
mm,
with people implementing this methodology personally. But again, because it affected the culture osmotically, when people started to do this, everybody around them kind of started to catch it. So that's another reason, another inspiration for us to write the book was so that people could maybe say, look, there, there's a lot more that could happen faster if the culture kind of bought into this and you had people who were accountable or responsible for
mm.
training development or just ensuring the standards in the culture got it.
Yeah, very good. In the tail end, if we want to point people to get a copy of the new book when it comes out, I'll make sure we release this and I'll put a link to it. The best place for them to go, is that to Amazon or to your website?
Well, you can you can pre-order on Amazon. It's already on the it's already up on there. We like people to support their local bookstores, so if you have a local bookstore you like to use, you can maybe pre-order through them or ask them about it. But it's out there. It would be available. Again, the official launch in the English version, the American English version, is May 21. It's going to launch in Britain about the same time in the UK, in London, and there will be an English version of it that's available, like for airports or whatever, in other countries like Australia and other places that are English speaking around that time. Don't know exactly when that is, but anybody can look and see. Do a Google search for Team David Allen, and you'll see it.
Yeah, perfect. I'll pop some links to make it easy for everybody to find. And yeah, just wanted to say a
Thank you.
huge thank you for the work that you do and the continued to support like small business owners around the world. I feel like your work is tremendously impactful, and
Yes.
I
Well,
can't wait
I've
to
been a
see.
small business. I've been a small business person, most of my life. So, I empathize. Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. Thank you.